Imagine for a moment that every word, every glance, every action directed toward you didn't have the power to shake your inner world. Picture yourself walking into a room filled with tension, criticism, or even hostility, and yet your spirit remains untouched, your heart steady, your mind clear. This is not about ignoring reality, nor is it about suppressing emotions until they explode. It is about awakening to the deeper truths within yourself. Truths Carl Jung often spoke of, that what disturbs us most in others is often a mirror of something unresolved within ourselves. When we begin to understand the unconscious forces at play both in us and in those around us, we unlock the ability to respond instead of react. This lecture is not about building walls of indifference, but about cultivating a presence so grounded that no insult, no rejection, no misunderstanding can pull you away from your center. It is about stepping into the freedom of knowing who you are, so fully that the noise of others cannot penetrate your peace. When we speak about projection, we enter into one of the most profound insights Carl Jung gave to modern psychology and human understanding. Projection is the process by which we attribute our own hidden feelings, motives, and unresolved conflicts onto others. It's like holding up a mirror to our unconscious and mistaking the reflection for the other person's reality. In day-to-day life, this explains why we so often feel angered, annoyed, or disturbed by what someone else does or says. The truth is, many times it is not their action in itself that creates the storm inside of us, but the way that action touches an unacknowledged wound or shadow within our own psyche. To truly understand how to never get angry or bothered by anyone, one must first learn how to see projection for what it is. A message from your inner world disguised as a problem with the outer world. Think about the last time someone made you angry. Perhaps it was a friend who criticized you, a stranger who disrespected you, or even a loved one who seemed indifferent to your needs. Your immediate emotional response might have felt completely justified. You believed the anger was caused by them, but if you paused and dug deeper, you would see that the intensity of your anger is rarely about the external event itself. If criticism triggers rage, it may point to your own unresolved insecurity or fear of inadequacy. If indifference makes you seethe, perhaps it reflects your own hidden need for validation. If disrespect cuts deeply, it may mirror your own unconscious doubts about yourself. In Jungian terms, the shadow, those parts of ourselves we have repressed or denied, tends to surface when mirrored by others. They become the carriers of what we refuse to face within. Projection is not inherently negative. It is, in fact, a vital tool for growth if we learn to recognize it. Each time you find yourself bothered by someone else, it is an opportunity to turn the gaze inward. Instead of asking, "Why are they like this?" ask, "Why is this affecting me so much?" That shift in questioning moves you from being a victim of your emotions to being a student of your unconscious. In that moment, the person who annoyed you is transformed into a teacher, guiding you toward deeper self-awareness. When you see it this way, anger loses its power to control you. The energy that once flared up in resentment is redirected into curiosity, reflection, and understanding. Jung often described how the unconscious communicates through symbols, dreams, and projections. When you become conscious of your projections, you begin to reclaim parts of yourself that you have abandoned. For example, if you are constantly irritated by people you perceive as arrogant, it might mean you've disowned your own need for confidence and self-assertion. Your anger toward them may be a hidden call to develop those qualities within yourself, in a balanced way. If you are deeply bothered by people who seem lazy or unmotivated, it could reflect your own repressed longing for rest or a break from perfectionism. The people who irritate us most often carry pieces of ourselves we are unwilling to see. By reclaiming those parts, the irritation dissolves, and instead of being angry, you begin to feel whole. The path toward freedom from anger, therefore, begins not with controlling others or suppressing emotions, but with developing the courage to face your own shadow. The shadow is not evil or destructive by nature, it is simply the unacknowledged. It is everything you deny, avoid, or suppress, often because it conflicts with the image you want to present to the world. For instance, if you pride yourself on being kind, generous, and patient, you might repress your natural feelings of irritation, selfishness, or impatience. But those repressed parts do not disappear. They slip into the unconscious and wait to surface in projection. When someone else acts selfishly or impatiently, it triggers an explosion in you because it awakens your denied qualities. This is why some insults cut so deeply and others barely touch you. It depends on how closely the insult aligns with your own hidden insecurities. Learning to identify projection requires self-honesty. The next time you are angry, pause and ask, what part of me is being mirrored here? What wound, insecurity, or denied aspect of myself is this person unconsciously bringing to the surface? This doesn't excuse the other person's behavior. It simply allows you to take your power back, instead of letting their words or actions control your emotional state. You use the experience as a mirror for self-discovery. Over time, this practice weakens the grip of anger. You no longer see others as enemies attacking your peace, but as mirrors reflecting areas of yourself that require attention and healing. Another key dimension to understanding projection is recognizing that what we love in others is also a projection. Just as our anger points to unresolved pain, our admiration often points to qualities we have not yet fully owned. When you are drawn to someone's courage, creativity, or wisdom, it might be because those qualities also exist within you but remain dormant. By becoming conscious of both negative and positive projections, you integrate more of yourself and rely less on others to define your emotional landscape. In this way, Jung's concept of projection becomes a powerful path to individuation, the process of becoming whole, authentic, and unshakably centered. Consider how different life feels when you live with this awareness. Instead of walking through the world feeling constantly vulnerable to others' words, moods, or behaviors, you walk with an inner shield of insight. Someone criticizes you, and instead of boiling with anger, you calmly ask yourself why their opinion matters so much. Someone disrespects you, and instead of plotting revenge or holding a grudge, you reflect on whether you truly believe in your worth or are secretly doubting it. Someone ignores you, and instead of being crushed by their indifference, you recognize your own hunger for validation and begin to heal it from within rather than seeking it from outside. In every scenario, the control returns to you. You are no longer tossed about by the winds of others' behavior because you understand that the storm begins inside, not outside. There is immense freedom in realizing that no one truly has the power to make you angry. What they do is merely the spark. What burns is already within you. Projection teaches us that the fire belongs to us, and therefore, we are the only ones who can extinguish it. This realization shifts you from blaming others to taking radical responsibility for your inner state. And in that responsibility lies liberation. No longer must you wait for people to behave perfectly in order to feel peace. You can live in peace regardless of their behavior, because peace has become an internal choice, not an external condition. The work of uncovering projections is not always comfortable. It demands humility to admit that the anger you feel towards someone else may in fact be a reflection of yourself. It requires courage to look at parts of yourself you would rather deny, but the reward is extraordinary. A life in which you are no longer easily provoked, no longer imprisoned by irritation, no longer enslaved by the moods of others. Instead, you live with an inner clarity that sees through the surface of conflict into the deeper layers of the psyche. And in that vision, the grip of anger is broken, not by force or suppression, but by understanding. When Jung said that everything that irritates us about others can lead to an understanding of ourselves, he was pointing us toward a path of self-mastery. That mastery doesn't mean never feeling anger, it means never being controlled by it. It means learning to see anger as a signal, not a sentence, a signal that points inward, guiding you to the places in yourself that still require healing and integration. With each step on that path, you reclaim more of your power, more of your peace, and more of your authentic self. And in doing so, you gradually reach a place where no one, not the critic, not the betrayer, not the disrespectful stranger can shake your center, because you have learned the art of turning every projection into self-awareness, and every irritation into growth. Building inner awareness is at the heart of emotional mastery, because without awareness we are blind to the roots of our reactions. When something or someone provokes us, we often assume the cause lies entirely outside ourselves, but the deeper truth is that reactions are born from the interaction between the external trigger and the inner landscape of our psyche. Two people can experience the same situation yet respond in completely different ways, not because the situation itself holds inherent meaning, but because of the different internal frameworks each person carries. The path to never being angry or bothered by anyone begins with cultivating a heightened awareness of that inner framework, the hidden beliefs, unresolved wounds, habitual patterns, and unconscious drives that shape how we perceive the world. Awareness transforms these inner forces from masters into subjects. Once we see them clearly, they no longer control us with the same intensity. Inner awareness begins with noticing triggers. A trigger is not just something that irritates you, it is a doorway into the deeper layers of your unconscious. When someone says something that makes your blood boil, your awareness can either stay at the surface or go deeper at the surface. You blame the other person. they made me angry. But if you go deeper, you ask, why did this specific comment affect me so strongly? What part of me feels threatened or wounded by this? That question is the seed of awareness. Over time, you realize that most of what triggers you has less to do with the present moment and more to do with past experiences, unresolved pain, or long-held beliefs about yourself and the world. For example, imagine someone interrupts you during a meeting and you feel a surge of anger. On the surface, the cause appears simple, they were rude. But if you take the moment as a mirror, you may notice that the anger carries a familiar sting, one you have felt many times before. Perhaps it connects back to childhood moments when you felt silenced, dismissed, or overlooked. Your unconscious mind links the present interruption to those old memories, amplifying the emotional intensity. Without awareness, you lash out at the interrupter. With awareness, you pause, recognize the old wound being touched, and respond from a place of clarity, rather than raw emotion. The external event becomes an invitation to heal something internal. Awareness is also about observing the body. Our emotions do not only reside in the mind, they live in the body, often surfacing before we are consciously aware of them. Anger, for instance, may first appear as tightness in the chest, a quickening of the breath, a heat in the face, or a clenching of the jaw. By training yourself to notice these bodily signals, you catch anger at its earliest stages, before it snowballs into words or actions you regret. This bodily awareness allows you to intervene with conscious breathing, grounding techniques, or simply a pause. In that pause, you create space between stimulus and response. And in that space lies your freedom. Developing inner awareness also involves recognizing patterns. Anger does not appear randomly. It follows predictable scripts. Perhaps you notice you often become upset when you feel ignored, or when someone questions your competence, or when you perceive unfairness. By mapping these recurring patterns, you begin to uncover the core themes that fuel your emotional responses. Often, these themes point to core beliefs formed early in life. If you believe deep down that you are unworthy of respect, then any act of perceived disrespect will ignite anger. If you believe that you must always be in control, then moments of uncertainty or failure will provoke frustration. Awareness of these patterns does not eliminate them overnight, but it loosens their grip. You stop being surprised by your anger and start understanding it as part of a larger story. You are rewriting. Jung often spoke of the importance of bringing the unconscious into consciousness, because until we do, the unconscious will continue to govern our lives and we will call it fate. Inner awareness is precisely this process, making the unseen forces visible so that they no longer dictate your reactions automatically. Each time you catch yourself mid-reaction and trace it back to its inner root, you weaken the hold of the unconscious. What once felt like an unstoppable surge of anger now becomes an opportunity for insight. This is how transformation begins, not by suppressing emotions, but by illuminating them. Mindfulness is one of the most powerful tools for cultivating this awareness. When you practice observing your thoughts and feelings without judgment, you develop the capacity to witness your inner life with clarity. Instead of being swept away by anger, you notice it arising, like watching a storm form on the horizon. You see the clouds gathering in your mind, the waves rising in your body, and you remain the observer rather than the victim. This witnessing stance allows you to step out of identification with the emotion. You are no longer angry but aware of anger arising. That subtle shift changes everything, because it gives you choice. You can decide how to respond rather than being enslaved by the emotion. Another aspect of inner awareness is learning to name emotions accurately. Many people collapse different feelings into the single label of anger, but awareness reveals the subtler emotions hiding beneath. Sometimes what looks like anger is really hurt, fear, shame, or sadness. By naming the precise emotion, you gain a clearer understanding of what you truly need in that moment. If it is fear, perhaps you need reassurance. If it is hurt, perhaps you need empathy. If it is shame, perhaps you need self-compassion. Without awareness, these needs remain buried, and anger becomes the mask. With awareness, you strip away the mask and address the real emotion, which dissolves the anger at its root. Journaling can also deepen this awareness. When you record the moments you felt angry or bothered, and then reflect on what was happening internally, you begin to see patterns more vividly. Writing forces you to slow down and articulate what you felt, what you thought, and what memories or beliefs were activated. Over time, this practice builds a map of your inner landscape, allowing you to anticipate and understand your emotional triggers with greater clarity. Instead of being caught off guard, you recognize the early signs and choose differently. Inner awareness is not only about noticing the negative but also about acknowledging your strengths. Often we underestimate our ability to remain calm, to extend compassion, or to detach from provocation by paying attention to moments when you responded well, when you resisted the urge to lash out or stayed composed in the face of irritation. You reinforce your capacity for emotional mastery. Awareness grows in both directions, noticing what pulls you into anger and noticing what anchors you in peace. In relationships, inner awareness allows you to break cycles of conflict. When you know your triggers, you can communicate them more clearly. Instead of erupting in blame, you might say, "When I feel interrupted, it brings up old feelings of not being heard, and I need a moment to gather my thoughts." This kind of self-aware communication disarms defensiveness in others and fosters understanding. Anger that once fueled arguments becomes a bridge to deeper connection because it is channeled into vulnerability and honesty at its deepest level. Inner awareness connects you to the observer within the part of you that is beyond all emotions, beyond all triggers, beyond all reactions. Jung might call this connection to the self, the core of your being that remains untouched by the chaos of the ego and the world. When you live from this center, you are no longer tossed about by every provocation. You may still feel the initial stirrings of anger, but you witness them from a place of calm detachment. The storm passes through, but you remain grounded. This is the essence of never being bothered by anyone, not the absence of emotion, but the presence of awareness so deep that emotion loses its power to dominate you. Awareness is like turning on the light in a dark room. Before the light, every shadow startles you, every sound feels threatening, and you stumble into furniture. Once the light is on, nothing in the room has changed, but everything feels different because you can see clearly. Inner awareness is that light. The external world may remain filled with critics, interrupters, disrespectful people, and provocations, but with the light of awareness, you no longer stumble blindly into anger. You see what is happening inside, you recognize the old patterns at play, and you choose your response consciously. This is how awareness transforms irritation into understanding, conflict into growth, and anger into clarity. Cultivating emotional detachment is often misunderstood. Many people hear the word detachment and imagine coldness, indifference, or apathy. They fear that if they detach, they will stop caring about others, become distant, or lose their capacity for love. But true emotional detachment, as understood in the psychological and even spiritual sense, is not about shutting down the heart. It is about creating enough space between yourself and your emotions that you are not controlled or consumed by them. Detachment does not mean you feel nothing. It means you feel everything with clarity but refuse to let temporary emotions dictate your choices, reactions, or identity. It is the difference between being swept away by a storm and standing on the shore, watching the waves rise and fall, knowing you remain safe and steady. To cultivate emotional detachment, one must begin by understanding the difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is immediate, unconscious, and often destructive. It arises when you are fused with your emotion, when anger or irritation completely blinds your judgment and compels you to act. Response, on the other hand, is conscious, measured, and intentional. It arises when you notice the emotion, give it space, and then choose how to act in alignment with your values rather than your impulses. Detachment is the key that unlocks this gap between stimulus and response. It creates the pause where freedom lives. Imagine someone insults you in public. Without detachment, your ego leaps into defense mode. You fire back with words equally sharp, or you brood in resentment. With detachment, however, you recognize the insult as sound vibrations formed into words. You notice the sting in your chest, the heat rising in your face, the urge to retaliate, but instead of acting, you step back internally. You remind yourself that the insult reflects more about the other person's state of mind than about your true worth. In that moment, you choose silence, humor, or calm clarification instead of anger. Detachment has given you the power to respond wisely rather than be enslaved by emotion. Emotional detachment also requires learning not to over-identify with emotions. When you say, "I am angry," you merge your entire identity with a temporary feeling, but when you shift your language to, "I feel anger," you create separation. The emotion becomes an experience you are having, not the essence of who you are. This linguistic shift may seem small, but it is transformative. It reminds you that emotions pass, just as clouds move through the sky. You are the sky, vast and constant, not the clouds. The anger, irritation, or frustration may temporarily obscure your clarity, but they always move on if you don't cling to them. Detachment allows you to remain the sky rather than be swallowed by every cloud that appears. Another vital practice in cultivating detachment is perspective taking. Many of our emotional reactions are intensified by narrow focus. We zoom in on the present moment and magnify its importance until it feels unbearable. Detachment zooms out. It asks, will this matter a year from now? Will it matter even a month from now? Often, the things that provoke our greatest anger: someone cutting us off in traffic, a coworker's rudeness, a stranger's criticism online, are fleeting moments that will vanish from memory. By zooming out, you recognize their insignificance and reclaim your peace. Detachment is, in part, the art of choosing what deserves your energy and what does not. Boundaries play an equally essential role in detachment. Many people remain entangled in cycles of anger because they confuse attachment with love. They believe that caring for someone means allowing themselves to be constantly hurt or provoked. Detachment teaches otherwise. To truly care for yourself and others, you must establish clear boundaries. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, detachment does not mean tolerating abuse. It means calmly but firmly withdrawing your energy from situations that harm you. It means refusing to internalize the negativity of others. Boundaries are not walls built from resentment. They are lines drawn from self. Detachment empowers you to uphold those lines without guilt or anger, because you recognize that you cannot control another person's behavior, only your response to it. Jung's insights remind us that much of what bothers us in others originates from the projections of our own psyche. Detachment builds upon this by reminding us that other people's projections also belong to them, not to us. When someone lashes out in anger, they may be projecting their own insecurities or frustrations. Without detachment, you absorb their projection and react defensively. With detachment, you step aside internally and let their storm pass without making it your own. You see their anger as their burden, not yours. In doing so, you maintain your inner stability. Detachment also draws from the practice of observing rather than judging. When irritation arises, instead of labeling it as bad or resisting it, you simply observe it. You notice the sensation, the thought, the urge. You allow it to exist without feeding it. Judgment fuels emotions. Observation diffuses them. For example, when you tell yourself, I shouldn't be angry, or this always happens to me, you add layers of resistance and self-pity to the original emotion, amplifying it. When you simply say, anger is arising in me, you remove the judgment and let the emotion pass naturally. Observation is the purest form of detachment, because it frees you from being entangled in stories about the emotion. A powerful metaphor for detachment is that of holding a burning coal. When you grip it tightly, the heat burns you, and your pain intensifies. When you loosen your grip and hold it lightly, the heat is still there, but it no longer sears your skin. Anger and irritation are like burning coals. The tighter you hold them through attachment, judgment, and identification, the more you suffer. Detachment loosens the grip. The coal may still exist for a while, but it does not define or wound you. Detachment also involves letting go of the need to control others. Much of our anger arises because we want people to behave according to our expectations. We want them to be respectful, considerate, honest, fair, and kind. When they fail, we become frustrated. But detachment recognizes that others are autonomous, beings with their own paths, wounds, and choices. You cannot control them, and you do not need to. Your peace does not depend on their behavior. When you relinquish the illusion of control, you stop being constantly upset by the unpredictable actions of others. You focus instead on controlling the only thing you truly can: yourself. In relationships, detachment transforms conflict. Suppose your partner says something thoughtless. Without detachment, you react with equal thoughtlessness, escalating the conflict. With detachment, you pause and recognize that their comment reflects their state of mind, not your value. You can then respond with curiosity, asking what they are truly feeling or needing, rather than lashing back. Detachment makes room for compassion, because you are not blinded by your own ego. You can see their humanity, even in their mistakes. Cultivating detachment requires practice, because it runs counter to our conditioned habits. Society often equates quick, fiery reactions with strength, when in truth they are signs of weakness, of being easily controlled by external forces. True strength lies in maintaining your center when others lose theirs. It lies in staying calm when provoked, not out of fear or repression, but out of conscious choice. Each time you succeed in detaching from anger, you reinforce new neural pathways in the brain, making calmness your default rather than reactivity. Meditation, particularly practices of observing thoughts and emotions, strengthens detachment. When you sit in stillness and watch thoughts arise and pass, you experience firsthand that you are not your thoughts. When you watch emotions come and go, you learn that you are not your emotions either. This realization sinks into your daily life, so that when irritation arises in conversation or conflict, you naturally observe rather than attach. You become the witness rather than the participant in every emotional storm. Detachment is not about isolation, it is about freedom. It allows you to engage with others without being enslaved by their opinions or moods. You can love deeply without clinging, listen attentively without absorbing negativity, and care without being consumed. It is a balance of openness and boundaries, of compassion and clarity. Far from making you cold, detachment makes you warmer, because you are no longer defensive or reactive. You can offer love and kindness freely, untainted by the distortions of anger and irritation. Ultimately, emotional detachment leads to inner peace. When you are no longer disturbed by every insult, disagreement, or provocation, your energy is preserved for what truly matters. Your mind becomes clearer, your relationships healthier, and your spirit lighter. You learn to walk through the chaos of the world with serenity, not because the world has changed, but because you have detachment. Becomes your anchor, keeping you steady no matter how turbulent the waters around you become. Living from your authentic self means discovering and embodying the deepest layers of who you are, beneath the masks, the roles, and the defenses that life has taught you to wear. Many of the reasons we get angry or easily bothered by others are tied to a fragile sense of identity. When we do not know who we truly are, we seek validation from external sources, and when that validation is denied, challenged, or withheld, we react with irritation, defensiveness, or rage. But when we anchor ourselves in authenticity, in the unshakable knowledge of our true worth and inner grounding, no insult, rejection, or misunderstanding can pull us away from our center. Carl Jung often spoke about individuation, the process of becoming whole, integrating the unconscious, and realizing the self. It is this process of individuation that gives rise to authenticity, and it is from this place that peace and freedom from anger naturally emerge. The journey toward authenticity begins with self-knowledge. This is not the surface knowledge of preferences, hobbies, or achievements, but the deeper awareness of values, beliefs, desires, wounds, and strengths that make up the unique essence of your being. Without this knowledge, we drift through life wearing masks shaped by family expectations, cultural norms, and societal pressures. We play roles to fit in, to be liked, or to avoid conflict, but these roles leave us vulnerable. When someone challenges the mask we wear, we feel attacked because we have not anchored ourselves in something deeper. The authentic self, however, is not dependent on approval or validation. It knows its worth, not as a performance to be judged, but as an inherent truth that cannot be taken away. Authenticity requires courage, because it often means breaking away from the patterns and expectations imposed on us by others. Many of the triggers that bother us in daily life stem from living inauthentically. For instance, if you have suppressed your creative impulses to pursue a career path expected by your family, you may find yourself becoming easily irritated by others who express their creativity freely. Their authenticity highlights your suppression, and the discomfort manifests as anger. By reclaiming your own authenticity, by daring to live in alignment with your true desires, the envy and irritation dissolve. You no longer need to compare or compete, because you are grounded in your own truth. Living authentically also means embracing the shadow side of the self. Jung taught that the shadow holds the disowned parts of ourselves, the qualities we deny, repress, or hide because they conflict with our conscious self-image. If you see yourself as kind and selfless, you may repress feelings of anger or selfishness, but they do not disappear. They remain in the unconscious and leak out in projections, causing you to be easily triggered by others who display those traits. Authentic living requires acknowledging the shadow, owning it as part of the whole self, and integrating it with compassion. When you accept your capacity for anger, selfishness, or weakness, you are no longer so disturbed by those qualities. In others, you recognize them as human, neither defining nor destroying your sense of worth. This integration of the shadow strengthens authenticity and dissolves the need to react with hostility. Another key aspect of authenticity is in accordance with your deepest values rather than external expectations. Much of our anger arises when we compromise ourselves, when we say yes, when we mean no, when we remain silent, when we long to speak. or when we pretend to agree to avoid conflict. These compromises create inner tension, and that tension leaks out as irritation with others. When you live authentically, you honor your own boundaries, your own voice, and your own truth. You learn to say no without guilt, to speak with honesty, and to act in alignment with what feels right at the core of your being. This alignment creates inner peace, because you are no longer torn between your inner truth and outer performance. And when you are at peace within, the provocations of others cannot easily disturb you. Authenticity also frees you from the endless comparison that fuels anger and insecurity. When you live from the false self, you constantly measure yourself against others who has more success, who receives more praise, who appears happier. This comparison breeds envy, resentment, and irritation. But the authentic self does not compare, because it recognizes the uniqueness of its own path. It knows that no one else can walk your journey or embody your essence. From this perspective, others' successes do not threaten you but inspire you, because they affirm the beauty of authenticity. Instead of being bothered by others, you celebrate them, knowing that your worth remains untouched. Living authentically also transforms how you interpret criticism. When you are anchored in the false self, criticism feels like an attack on your fragile identity. You feel exposed, defensive, and angry. But when you live from your authentic self, criticism loses much of its sting. If the criticism is untrue, it does not disturb you because you know who you are, and the false words cannot touch that truth. If the criticism contains truth, you can accept it with humility and grow from it, because it does not threaten your core worth. Authenticity creates a buffer between your identity and others' opinions. You no longer need to fight to defend yourself, because you are already secure. To cultivate authenticity, you must learn to listen to the inner voice rather than the noise of the outer world. This inner voice, often drowned out by conditioning and fear, speaks through intuition, dreams, and deep longings. Jung emphasized the importance of paying attention to these inner signals, for they guide us toward the wholeness of the self. When you honor this voice, you make choices that resonate with your true being. You may change careers and toxic relationships, pursue creative passions, or shift spiritual practices not to please others but to honor yourself. With each step toward authenticity, your peace deepens, and your susceptibility to anger diminishes, because you are no longer living at odds with yourself. Authenticity is not perfection. In fact, it requires embracing imperfection. The false self is obsessed with appearing flawless, always fearing criticism or failure. The authentic self accepts mistakes as part of growth and vulnerability as part of humanity. When you accept yourself fully, flaws and all, you disarm the power of others to make you feel small. Their insults lose weight, because you have already made peace with your imperfections. Their judgments lose impact, because you are no longer pretending to be something you are not. Authenticity brings freedom from the exhausting performance of perfection and replaces it with the ease of being real. Living from your authentic self also nurtures resilience. Life inevitably brings challenges, losses, and disappointments. But when you are grounded in authenticity, you meet these experiences with stability. Anger often arises when we resist reality, when we demand that life conform to our expectations. The authentic self, however, aligns with reality rather than fighting it. It adapts without losing itself, bends without breaking, and learns from every experience. This resilience prevents you from being consumed by anger when life does not go as planned, because you no longer equate external circumstances with internal worth. Relationships flourish when you live authentically. Instead of hiding behind masks or manipulating to gain approval, you show up as your true self. This honesty may initially scare some people, especially those accustomed to the false self, but it ultimately attracts deeper connections built on trust. Conflict becomes easier to navigate, because authenticity removes the need for defensiveness. When you are secure in yourself, you can listen to others without feeling attacked, communicate without hostility, and love without conditions. This is why authenticity is not only a gift to yourself but also to those around you. It creates harmony that anger cannot penetrate. Spiritual traditions across cultures echo this truth. Peace comes from being aligned with your true nature, whether it is described as the self, the soul, or the essence. Living authentically means recognizing that your worth is intrinsic and unshakable. External circumstances, other people's opinions, and the shifting tides of life cannot alter it. When you live from this realization, you walk through the world with calm assurance. Insults become noise, misunderstandings become lessons, and conflict becomes an opportunity for growth rather than a battlefield. To live authentically requires daily practice. It is not a single choice, but a continual returning to yourself. Each morning you ask, am I living today according to my deepest truth, or am I performing for approval? Each evening you reflect, where did I honor myself, and where did I betray myself? This ongoing reflection strengthens authenticity, and as it strengthens, your reactions to others soften. You become less defensive, less irritable, less angry, because you are no longer dependent on others for your sense of self. Ultimately, living from your authentic self is the foundation of unshakable peace. It grounds you in a truth so deep that no insult can uproot it, no rejection can diminish it, and no misunderstanding can distort it. When you are fully yourself, you are free from the chains of external validation, free from the projections of others, and free from the endless cycles of anger. You become a presence of calm in a turbulent world, not because the world is calm, but because you have found the center within yourself that nothing and no one can disturb.